welcome back to Real Talk with Dr. LaWanda Hill. I am excited, as usual, to be here with you all for this week's episode. We've been in this series on Black women practicing vulnerability, and today's topic I think is so familiar and so relatable to so many Black women across the globe. And we're going to be talking about breaking out of survival mode, right? Really going to be talking about what that means, what that looks like. How do we even know we're in survival mode? I think it's safe to say that one of the things that Black women are very much so well acquainted with is how to survive. But before we even talk about that, I want to talk about the need for survival, right? Like, what does it really mean when you are in survival mode? Usually, when people are trying to survive, they are trying to overcome, escape, or defeat the many different forces or threats to their life, right? We think about people in combat who are trying to survive a war, survive combat. We think about people who are in the midst of violence or domestic abuse. People are trying their ways to get away from the threat, right? Which is in survival mode, to get to a space of safety, right? So that they can get back to their lives. There are so many different forces, y'all. There's so many different forces at play that strangle the life out of Black women that we have to survive. And our ancestors definitely had way more threats, more struggles to their humanity, but they were fighting constantly, right, to survive, to get to the next phase of life. And what we have witnessed is that way of being passed down to us. And not only that, we don't have the systems or the systems that are in place to protect us, like, let's say, welfare services or the police or the doctors or mental health practitioners, attorneys, the legal system. All of these different systems that are in place that are supposed to be of support are the very systems that have been in place that serve to marginalize, oppress, and strangle the life out of Black women. So I say all of that to set up the context that it is understandable that we have been in survival mode for a long period of time out of necessity. But as we're moving toward, having more resources, and we're seeing kind of this pivot and this shift as we're centering, our mental health and well-being, and we have shows like Real Talk with Dr. LaWanda Hill to center our narratives and our stories as we pursue higher versions of ourselves, I think it's important to meet people where they are. And I know that I have myself struggled with being in survival mode all of the time. I didn't grow up in a family that had modest means, or excessive means. I grew up in a family that we had just enough means, and sometimes we didn't have enough. So there was never abundance, right? And if there was abundance, that abundance was short-lived. It was short-term. It wasn't something that was a norm. And so I spent a significant amount of my life just trying to survive to get to the next phase, to get to the next phase, to get to the next phase. And certainly when you're in that phase, that stage, because of, let's say, limited resources, let's say a number of different just adverse experiences working up against you, then you develop a mindset, right? You develop a certain mindset, a certain type of habit. And you really have a limited capacity because you have so many things working against you and you're worried about so many things that you're in that survival mode, right? And so having grown up in that and been in that survival mode for so long, when those adverse experiences begin to decrease, right? Or when I begin to develop more resources to respond to the different adverse, experiences or stressors, I still found myself in survival mode. And that's the place that I want to talk about today. And I'm so excited to have Dr. Amanda Long from True Space Therapy here to talk with us about what it looks like, feels like when Black women are in survival mode. How do we move out of survival mode to a state of resilience? And how do we even move from resilience to a state of thriving? Because ultimately, becoming the highest or higher versions of ourselves is a state of thriving. And so many of us, though, don't even kind of realize that we are in a space of survival because we've had to be. And so I love Dr. Amanda's practice and her work because she creates a space and she calls it a place where you can perfectly be a masterpiece and a work in progress at the same time. And I know that there are so many different places in the world that create threats. So many spaces in the world that create threats for Black women that don't create a safe space to be a masterpiece and a work in progress, or to just be safe enough for you to be vulnerable and let down the defenses of being in survival mode. And so I'm excited to be joined with Dr. Amanda Long. She is a licensed clinical psychologist out of Chicago, Illinois, and she is the founder and owner of True Space Therapy Practices, where she centers Black women and their stories, and she really helps Black women redefine strength. What was your unique journey to this specific niche?
I really think that it kind of began as I tried to kind of come out of or transition from being a student into a professional. When you're a student, you have to do a lot of stuff that you do not want to do for a lot of people. And I really thought about, like, what do I want my career to look like? What population do I get excited about working with? You know, what population am I passionate about helping? And it was clear as day, you know, women that looked like me.
Yeah.
I can remember having a conversation with my parents when I told them I wanted to, you know, continue on and get my doctoral degree and be a psychologist. And they're like, okay, yeah, that's cool. How much money are you gonna make? And then I had to answer that question. And then I said, like, I also would like y'all to know that when I'm able to finally acquire this degree, I want to be in a position where I am able to give back to Black women and offer them a safe space to be themselves and offer quality therapeutic care. And so I've been blessed enough to have, I think, a great education and to be able to use that education again for, you know, a demographic that may not have access to it, or they have access to it, but they don't have, you know, the luxury of having someone that looks like them.
To be able to create a space for Black women to be and to be safe, I think is just so very important, especially when we start talking about our challenges with vulnerability, because not everybody gets that. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Absolutely.
I want to hear your thoughts on, like, why do we have so many challenges with vulnerability? And because I know that that's what led to your practice and your amazing eBook we're going to talk about. But talk to me a little bit more about that.
Sure. I think it really lies in what we've been exposed to. I know for me growing up, the only time that I really saw my mom show emotion was when someone had pissed her off to the 20th power. So she was able to be angry. She was angry well. Like, you are a good angry person. She was able to be angry, and then she was able to show like a very deep sadness. But with that sadness, it was only for a short period of time, because I can recall walking into my mother's room. I was really young, seeing her sad, and then her seeing me and like getting it together. Turning it completely off, like it never existed. And so, you know, being exposed to that at such a young age, and then always hearing about how strong my grandmother was.
And being praised.
Yes, absolutely. My grandmother, there was a meme, LaWanda, that had me cracking up. And it was like, y'all are not as strong as your grandmothers because she stayed with y'all, you know, with your grandfather after 3 outside kids.
Oh, Lord.
Right?
Yes.
Not my granny. So the first husband, divorced, second husband, divorced. And so she always was like the beacon of strength to me. She was a single mother for so long, for her whole, pretty much the entirety of my mother's life, and the entirety of many of her children, their lives. She worked 3 jobs and she didn't really complain. That's just what you do. So, you know, kind of having those images, I think for Black women, being exposed to those type of images in their life, it makes it difficult to think about what else it could look like.
And to deviate from it, because you feel like if you deviate from it, like you're not doing what you needed to do. I remember my mama saying all the time, I'm stressed out. I'm just stressed out. And I remember saying, yes, I'm just stressed out. Like, and I remember getting to a place where like, I'm finally stressed out. Like that's aspirational. Like, it's like, that's something you need to trying to do.
Yes.
You don't talk enough about how representation really matters. If that's all you've
Absolutely.
seen, that's all we
Absolutely.
do. And that's all that's what they had to do.
That's really important to acknowledge too, that there are so many systems in place that just make it difficult for us to express vulnerability because of a fear of repercussion. And so, like, how am I supposed to show up and be safe and vulnerable if I feel like, you know, there's going to be something that's negative that happens as a result? I'd rather just do it myself and get it done and make it happen.
Because if I don't, then what's the alternative? I can't show up at the doctor and be vulnerable. They're biased. I can't show up in my family and be vulnerable. They counting on me. I can't show up at work and be vulnerable because if I do, then I'm going to be the stereotype, right, of angry or whatever. I can't show up sometimes in my friendships and be vulnerable because
I'm the strong friend.
I'm the strong friend, right? That's the role that I play. And so, damn, when I finally do have a place to show up and be vulnerable, I don't even know how.
It's foreign. And not only that, it's uncomfortable as hell.
Yeah.
It's like you are literally confronting your humanity.
Ooh, say more about that, Amanda.
Just this idea of like you are realizing that you're human and that you're flawed.
Ooh.
How terrifying is that? To feel like you have it all together?
Yes.
And then to kind of confront yourself and really, be realistic and say, well, no, I don't. And these are all of the flaws that I have.
When I think about it, it's like strong Black woman implies that you strong. You can do what you can do. Black girl magic implies that you magical and that you killing it.
You're a unicorn.
You're a unicorn. Perfection is attainable. Right. And so vulnerability is the opposite of that. Vulnerability says that actually, no, it's not. And neither were your parents or your parents or your parents.
Absolutely. This idea of vulnerability and kind of confronting your own mess, whether you've created it or it has been created around you. Because if you don't recognize what you need to improve upon, how can you thrive? It's impossible. But it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable. And to me, that's strength.
Yeah.
This idea of like just making it through, just getting through it, just surviving, that is sure helpful. And obviously I want you to make it through and I want you to survive, but at what cost? Once you're on the other side of survival, how has your life shifted? How has the quality of your life diminished?
I saw that. I saw when you posted, and I want to talk about those 3 spaces that Black women exist in, like that survival mode, that being resilient mode, and that thriving mode, because I believe we all can relate to it. And I'll share my own journey. Like I am last of 10, so we grew up, I wouldn't say like poverty, but it isn't always me. And so there was this ideal of like survival, right? Resilience. You just got to get through. You got to get through. You got to get through to the next, right? And so I just got to make it to high school to get to college. I got to get to college. I got to get to grad school. I got to get to grad school. I got to get my license. And then I can practice, right? So you're in this survival mode all the time. And I remember feeling like once I finally was licensed and doing well, like I remember being very uncomfortable because it's like I'm out of survival mode now, right?
Yeah.
And what do you do with your life when you're not just living for the next day? Like
when you're not putting out fires.
Right. I'm not putting out fires. I'm not just trying to make enough money or get enough sleep. It's like, wait, I got to think about my life 5 years from now. 10 years from now, I got to think about the kind of relationship that I want that's healthy. I got to think about the kinds of friendships that I want. Like to thrive, that shit is scary as hell. It was scary as hell because all I knew was surviving. A lot of us are in survival mode. And so there are 3 things that that Dr. Amanda and I want to talk about today. We're going to talk about survival, right? Because I think it's important. I'm on a mission to center Black women, our stories, our journeys, as we strive to be higher versions of ourselves. And I believe that's thriving, but I don't believe we start there. What are some of the indicators or stories or narratives that Black women can recognize to know that they're actually in survival mode?
Survival mode is exhausting. Like it feels like there's one thing after another.
Yeah.
And once you have, it's like almost like a video game. Like, okay, this is level 1.
Right.
Pick your player. How are you gonna get through this?
Right.
Once you've been able to be, what we deem successful, or you are able to overcome those adversities, there's another thing. Yeah. So like you're able to keep going, but it's almost like by the hair of your chinny chin chin. You are making it, you feel like you're making it barely. And you are tired. Not only that, there may be some physical issues that arise, right? So you may experience, chronic pain. If you have issues with chronic pain, that may be exacerbated. I have a lot of clients that will talk to me about sleep concern. And sleep is a huge indication that something is off.
Yeah.
And so just think about it. When you're like surviving and you're just trying to make it, you are almost in this constant state of like stress.
Yeah.
Right. Which, eventually turns from acute stress to like chronic stress.
Right. All the time.
You are in stress and you feel like you are stressed out, like what you said earlier, all the time. Yeah. Right. That is that survival. You feel it. It doesn't feel good. And it's so funny because there are so many people that don't know what it feels like to thrive.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so I think for a lot of folks, what they deem as making it and thriving is really just like survival with like a little razzle dazzle.
Right. Every once in a while.
Yeah. Right. And so that's kind of what I define as like resiliency. Now, like, don't get me wrong, resiliency is important. It is detrimental, or it is imperative that we are able to be resilient.
Yeah.
But when I say it's kind of like survival with like a little razzle dazzle and like a sprinkle of sunshine, I say that because like you're able to overcome these obstacles and kind of bounce back, right? So you're able to come back, you resist damage, you resist maybe, some of the detrimental outcomes of stress, and you can just you bounce. It's almost like you are at zero. You bounce back to zero. Yep. You're maintaining. Yeah. Right. And so remember, with survival, the quality of your life diminishes. With resiliency, it's just like you're like content.
I'm not amazing. This isn't necessarily bringing out the best version of me. I'm not growing. I'm not evolving. I'm not finding new ways to be. But I'm also not just surviving. I'm kind of somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And that feels good to be like, okay, I can handle these things and they aren't wearing me out.
Yeah.
And then you have this idea of like thriving. And thriving is like the mecca of life.
You're good. You killing it. Yes.
You're killing it.
Yes.
And that feels so empowering. To be able to be faced, or to be able to be confronted by challenges and know exactly how to navigate them in a way that it doesn't diminish your quality of life. And not only that, it allows you to flourish under these new conditions.
Because you have the resources, right? When I think about thriving, I think about like, it doesn't matter. So survival to me kind of feels like, shit, I got a problem. I don't have the resources to tackle it, And a lot of times I feel like we suffer, namely Black women, from learned helplessness. I know at least I did in grad school of like, shit, something simple as I have a cold, so I got to just thug it out.
Yes.
Right? And so that's survival. I just need to survive this cold because in the past I didn't have health insurance. And now I'm in phase. It's like, I've had my partners to be like, hey, you should go see a specialist. Like you're not in survival. It's like somebody got to tell you, you're not in survival mode no more.
Can I share a story really quickly? Because that just totally triggered something. I was so sick like a year ago around this time, right? And this is like COVID and like, oh my goodness, like what's going on? Are you okay? And I was adamant about not taking any medicine, drinking orange juice, like just real like raggedy ways to help myself. And my partner was like, you don't have to do that. Like, it's okay. Let's go to the doctor. Let's, let me help you. And I'm just like, I'm good.
Yeah.
And he's just like, why are you doing
why?
that?
And I feel like it's so unconscious, Dr. Amanda. It's so subconscious because you just like, and I even have moments of that. Like right now, I'm like, ooh, I need to figure out how to do such and such. Okay, let me just go YouTube. And it's like, or no, you could just hire somebody to do it.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Like you don't have to do that anymore, but we have to, specifically Black women, which is why I think this show is so important. It's like you need permission sometimes from somebody else to be like, girl, why are you drinking that orange juice when you can go to the doctor? Like, for what?
Yep.
For what?
Absolutely. So that idea of thriving is just like what you said, like you hit spot on. You're able to get through the same adversities, but while inflicting the least amount of stress on yourself.
Yeah.
By reaching out to your support. By, adopting better habits and better ways to think about things, by eliminating what isn't needed, what may not be needed, and what may be contributing to you needing to put out all of these fires.
Right.
And then kind of being able to bounce forward instead of like with resiliency, you just kind of bouncing back.
Class and intersectional identity now starts to play a role, right?
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
I think with thriving, a lot of people associate thriving with class.
Sure.
and
Sure.
income and that kind of thing. And I do believe to a large degree it is. You know what I'm saying? Like I ain't
Absolutely.
on Beyonce level. I don't got no whole,
Team.
I ain't got no whole team. That's a different kind of thrive, right?
Yeah.
But I do want to kind of bridge the gap because I do believe that there are a lot of people who listen who feel like, well, I don't have the means, and this is two doctors who may have the means. But what you said really struck me when you said like it's whether it's changing different thought patterns, different habits, different ways of being. There are resources, right? Because I do believe you need resources to thrive. Right. And those resources could be something simple as let me set more boundaries in my life, or let me ask for more help. Or let me just really pause to examine, damn, I'm in survival mode. Is there anything that I could do different that can get me to resilience, like a step by step? And so I do believe that it's important to really think about all the resources that we feel are helpful to help people thrive. I know that you have an ebook on redefining strength, I think.
Yes.
I wonder, is this a tool you created to help people thrive because you felt like it was such a struggle?
It was more so of a resource that I wanted to create to provide an opportunity for women to have some access to some type of mental wellness because therapy is a luxury.
It is
for many people. And so just kind of like what you said earlier, just about like, what can I take back to my community, especially for those that may not have access to what I offer, on a one-on-one basis. This was kind of my way to kind of give back. And so I created the ebook to, talk about vulnerability, to talk about self-care, to introduce this idea of like emotions and sitting in them and leaning into them and how powerful and important that they are. And also talk about this element of like self-compassion, like being nice to yourself, which is also a very foreign concept for many people. And so the ebook was created to just help women kind of dismantle this traditional idea of how we have been socialized to define strength. And really think about what kind of strength do you need to cultivate in your life in order to thrive.
That very definition of strength is what keeps us in survival mode a lot of the times. And as you're talking, like I have a visual in my mind of like, because I'm always thinking about who has the most resources and who has the least amount of resources. So I'm thinking about the woman who has the least amount of resources, who can cultivate a sacred space, even if it's in a corner with an incense and a light, 30 minutes to an hour a day to get this ebook and be like, let me just work through this space and just like take some space for myself. The woman who has the most resources, who can say, you know what, actually, y'all right, I'm in survival mode. I am not living my best life. I am not thriving. Let me talk about emotions. Let me lean into them. Let me be compassionate, be kind to myself. So I really see it as a resource. Like I really believe that those extra resources, specifically, like you said, we've never seen a model of it.
Absolutely. And my hopes was to kind of create it, being a Black woman, to show like, hey, look, these are things that I also struggle with. So within the ebook, I talk about some of my own experiences, and I talk about some of the things that I offer that I will say or present to my clients in therapy, just as a way to jumpstart this journey towards wellness. Whatever that may look like for the reader. And again, it's a tangible, pretty affordable.
I agree.
That, it's just available for you to embark on that journey at your own pace.
I think it's such a good resource. Like, I really think it's a good resource for people because it's just dawning on me a lot of, like, people don't even know where to start. They jumpstart their wellness journey. So many people don't even realize they're in survival mode. So what are some of your common women who are in survival mode but don't even know they're in survival mode? Like, what are some of the things you hear? Because I want to free somebody today. I want to free somebody today because you just might be in survival mode. I'll give you some examples and you give me some. I'll hear I'm just so exhausted. I don't have the time. I don't have the energy. Like, I just feel like I'm in autopilot. And I feel like I'm in a rut, and, it just feels like the same day. I just monotonous every day. You might be in survival mode.
Or whenever someone asks you how you're doing, I'm okay. I'm good.
Real quick.
I'm fine.
Yes, I'm good.
I'm cool. I'm good.
And every time I ask, what does cool look like? What does okay look like? What does I'm good look like? And every time I ask them that, it's like, well, I mean, I'm not good.
Yep.
So let's stop saying we good. So that's part of me being mindful, right? Let's
Yes,
start getting
absolutely.
to a place where we actually like, how am I? Like, am
Yeah.
I good?
Yep.
Am I not good? You know what I'm
There's
saying?
so much power in labeling that emotion, those emotions. You know, the one thing that's like my therapist pet peeve is my clients will say, well, I'm feeling like they made me feel some kind of way. And what is that way?
What is that?
And what emotion is that?
You may not know, and it's fine because I got feeling charts for you. And I may say how you feel. I know another telltale sign of survival mode is when you may be even disconnected from your emotions. You can't even label them. I can ask somebody how they feel and they start describing things. And I'm like, that's not a feeling though.
Yep.
Not an emotion. So you're so like pushed through that you don't have the language to really pause and say, actually, I'm tired.
And not only that, this idea of like, I don't have enough time to take care of myself.
That part. Yeah.
Right. Or like this idea of self-care is like, okay, well, on Sundays, I go get my pedicure and my manicure. And that's enough for me because, you know, I'm working, I have my kids, my partner, like it's a lot. And I just don't have the time to get away and spend it on myself.
And what do you say to that? What do you say to that? Because I be like, here we go. I mean, it's the same narrative. You do though. You actually do have time. That's what's in my head. But what do you say to that to the person who identify with it because they're a Black woman and they in the same story? How do we combat that?
You know what I try to do is to offer kind of like reasonable, attainable, small goals that they can aspire to accomplish, right? And so self-care does not have to be this 2 to 3 hour time period where you have, you know, removed yourself from the rest of humanity and you are in this zone with zen and candles. It could be just you in the moment, the car ride home, turning on music that you know helps to uplift you and turning off your ringer, not accepting any phone calls, not putting out the fires for other people, just allowing yourself to have a moment to yourself where you're doing some deep breathing. You are thinking about ways that you're grateful, showing and expressing gratitude, and you hyping yourself up. That's self-care. And so the goal is to kind of create those little pockets of self-care throughout your day. Because they are your buffers. They help you, you know, when you're confronted by these challenges to be able to navigate those challenges in a way that's probably, you know, much more useful and less detrimental than if you were to not give yourself that space and that time to reach some level of balance and you're constantly being confronted by stress. So self-care just gives you a moment to regain some kind of balance in your life.
And to refuel, because here's what I tell people all the time. Resilience is not about how much you can endure. It's about your capacity to recharge. Because one thing for certain, two for sure, is that life is going to throw some stress at you. And as a Black woman specifically, you're going to have a disproportionate amount of stress that you're going to have to manage just because of systemic oppression. Right.
Absolutely.
And so one of the things I like to tell Black women is if you know that you are going to travel across country, you going from California to New York, you know that car is going to need, if you're driving it, it's going to need gas. You're not going to wait till you on E to stop and get that gas. You're going to keep, I hope you're going to keep filling up once it gets to half a tank because you don't know where, you know, you may run into a space where it's a long patch before you can get gas again, or you may run into an obstacle or some type of weather conditions that you didn't expect. And I feel like we are the same. We have been conditioned to believe, let's just survive. Let's just get cross country. Let's just, you know, push through, get cross country.
By any means necessary.
And by any means necessary. And I want this message to disrupt that, to say, if you are in that space, let's start pausing to get gas. Little by little.
Oh, I love that.
You know, let's start pausing to get some gas, get out, stretch your legs, some water, get you, even sit down at a restaurant, because that's what's going to help you make it to the journey. And then, because if you don't, when you get to the journey, you're going to be, when you get to the destination, you're going to be exhausted.
And your gas hand are your emotions. They help you to identify what you need. So if you see you're diminishing on your gas, right. If you see that you're on E, or if you are, you know, experiencing those emotions that cause discomfort, what do you need? Asking yourself, like, what do I need in this moment? And sometimes it's hard to really identify like what you need when you're not used to asking for
That's
anything.
good. I agree.
Right. And so like something that I often say is, well, ask the people around you, what can you offer me right now?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh,
what I don't feel the best.
but what
Help
can
me.
I ask? It reminds me of the Insecure episode, the first episode, where Issa is going in and she pissed and she like, oh, this wrong and this wrong and this wrong. And Molly is like, have you eaten today? And she's like, no, let's get some food. You know, like
Yes.
you don't even know. Yeah, you
Yeah.
got other shit that's going on, but you hungry. That's what it is. You hungry, boo. You hungry. You may need some support.
Mm-hmm. And you got to be vulnerable enough to let people feel comfortable enough too with helping you. And that's a tricky dynamic, but it's helpful when you can create
that's
that.
hard because that's why we in this series on practicing vulnerability. And part of practicing vulnerability is identifying, wait a minute, I've been surviving a lot.
Yeah.
And that's kind of hard to confront. But I really do hope that this episode helps to confront that. Like, survival is not sustainable. And it's not the tool that's going to get you to where you need to get. So being able to say, actually, I don't have it all together. I don't know everything. Sometimes I don't even know what to ask for. I think that's pretty vulnerable, but it's a good starting place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, because it's vulnerability within, you know, because again, you have to kind of confront your own stuff in order to know what you need, in order to ask for, in order to receive it without guilt or shame. So like,
that's good. All right, let's wrap it up like that. All right, 3 steps to moving out of survival mode is vulnerability within, right?
Absolutely.
Vulnerability within looks like what, Dr. Amanda?
Pausing long enough to label it, to understand what it is, you know, and then to honor it. And what I mean by honoring it is sitting in it, being okay with it, but also allowing it to pass.
Yeah. I think that part is very, very important. I remember my therapist telling me, using this metaphor of sitting in it. She's like, you know, kind of think about a butterfly that's flying around you, or maybe has landed on your nose. You don't want to keep trying to sway it away. You want to just let it sit there. And when it's ready to fly away, it'll fly away.
Yes, ma'am.
And I often think about emotions as the same way. It's like, sit with it because it does have a message. You know, I think that step 1 is vulnerability within, because when you do be vulnerable within, you you arrive at what you really need. You know, you may say, I'm lonely. Actually, I'm hungry. Shit, I'm tired. You know, or I'm feeling defeated, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that first step of practicing vulnerability with it is a really good step. What would be the next step 2?
I think the next step is being able to express that out loud.
Yeah, that's good.
And whether it's just to yourself, you know, through like, you know, verbally saying these things, acknowledging it, acknowledging what you're experiencing, journaling through your emotions and recognizing how you feel in that way, or you know, like the ultimate, you know, test of vulnerability, this idea of being able to share with someone who you feel safe and comfortable with.
Yeah.
So when you speak things out loud, it makes them more real.
Yep.
And like what we said earlier, it reminds people that you're human. Because sometimes people will forget that like you have struggles, especially if you're this strong, you know, person or the strong friend. People are like, oh, you hurting? Okay, whoa. I know.
Acknowledging it to someone else is so powerful for the very reason that you just said, because people have this schema of us, right? To be strong. When we flipped, you know, Georgia, when you know, when Kamala won vice president, it was like Black women have saved democracy again, right? So people see us in this light. And I think when we honor our humanity, we begin to shed that, like, that we're human, you know, we may be strong just because we fucking had to be, okay?
We ain't had no choice.
We had no choice.
It wasn't fun.
If it's a dictatorship, guess who's going first? Us. So we don't got no choice but to flip this state, okay?
Yeah.
So I think it really gives people permission, which goes back to what you said at the beginning of this show, is that it makes us now have to face the fact that no, we're not perfect. And I know you have this nice, rosy, you know, schema of who I am, but I'm actually human because I'm acknowledging that. I think that's absolutely a really good step. And step 3,
recognizing our resources. And so, right, like, and you had mentioned this earlier. So again, once you've been able to communicate how you feel, to acknowledge it, once you've been able to communicate it, it's almost like, okay, now what next? sometimes no one can do anything for you, and it's kind of your responsibility to help yourself, right? To figure out, what needs to happen next, that's kind of your responsibility at times. But then other times you can be vocal and tell someone what it is that you're experiencing. And this is the kicker: allow them to show up for you.
That part.
Without the guilt or the shame.
Yeah. And if the guilt or shame comes up, sit with it. Here's an opportunity to repair guilt. I tell people, when you're moving out of survival mode and it feels foreign and you feel guilty or you feel weak, acknowledge it. Just don't let it change. Don't let it stand in the way of you receiving that support.
Exactly. And really receiving the support, like, allowing people again to show up for you. And like kind of creating that pattern, like adopting a new pattern, that you can then use to climb on about us.
Yes. Okay. After we stop that resource, we want to create a new pattern.
Yes.
Create that pattern. Put it on repeat is what I call it. Because it takes about 26, 27 days to develop a new habit.
Yeah.
So now we're actually moving ourselves out of that survival mode into kind of resilience, which is a good step. We're moving into resilience. And ultimately, the more we seek resources, the more our thoughts change, our surroundings change, our perspective change, we can get to thriving. But I thought it was so important to start with that survival mode that you talk about, because so many of us have lived in it for so long. I think very few have had to not experience it in some capacity, that I think it's important to give a step by step of how do we, like you said, climb out of that survival mode.
Yeah, absolutely. And throughout it all, I want to say being so kind and loving and compassionate with yourself. Because if you don't, it's almost like you're aiding in your suffering. Like you are experiencing these challenges, and then like you're beating yourself up on top of the challenges that you have to go through. It doesn't have to feel like that.
Yeah, I think that voice of self-compassion is so very important. We don't get it often. We haven't heard it often, but I think that there's several resources out there. I always admire and refer my clients to Alex L. She does a really good job with affirmations. So sometimes my clients are like, I don't even know where to start with being nice to myself. I'm like, Google Alex L. She'll give you something to affirm and begin to practice a very new voice.
I love that. I'm writing that down as a resource.
She's good. Clients. She is so good. Dr. Amanda, this has been such a great conversation. I love it. And I love that you have a resource. I'm so going to send it to my clients.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
It's so needed. It is so affordable. And so give us a little bit of overview of that resource, and then we'll close out.
The title of my book is called Strength Redefined. And it's really an opportunity, really a resource for women to have the opportunity to kind of confront maybe some of the things or the behaviors or their the way in which they make sense of their world. A way to confront some of those unhealthy thoughts and behaviors while also being exposed to new ways in which they can learn how to navigate their life or their world. And so, we cover emotional wellness, this idea of like leaning into your emotions, what that looks like. They're the big giant feelings wheel. So you no longer have to say, I'm good, I'm okay. I don't know.
We got you. No.
Right. I got you. Right. It also talks about the importance of support. Being able to acknowledge when you need support, so that aspect of vulnerability, and then ways in which you can kind of create your own support system. So it kind of walks you through like a blueprint of, creating support around you, and then how to use those people for different kinds of support. We also talk about self-compassion, or the book talks about self-compassion. So how are you kind to yourself along this journey? So when you confront all of the flaws and, the things that may still be under construction, how are you nice to yourself? How do you push yourself to continue to confront that stuff and work through it? And then lastly, self-care, which I think is so essential for everyone, just to be able to take care of yourself in a way that is intentional. That allows you to have a break from the hustle and bustle around you long enough to recharge. So all of those topics plus more are covered in the ebook. You're able to do a lot of journaling. I have many journaling prompts, as well as like just many activities that you can kind of you can exercise or you can attempt in during your everyday life. And so if you don't have the ability to see a therapist if that is not a luxury that you have, and you still want to, like, do some work on yourself. I think this is a great tool. And it's also a great tool if you are in therapy or you are about to begin therapy, just to kind of, present some information to your therapist to help her help you.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. This is Black women climbing out of survival mode, y'all. And we have tools for our unique journey, our unique path that really center our specific narrative. So I am so excited to have been able to sit down and catch up with Dr. Amanda. It's been a minute. And really share your voice, your expertise, and your skill set to the audience, because I definitely believe that many Black women are going to resonate with this episode. And I am hopeful and prayerful that a lot of Black women are going to recognize that they're in survival mode and they're going to do the work to climb out of it. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope to have you on again.
Yes, thank you for having me. This has been so fun. I appreciate you for reaching out and just giving me a platform to do what I love to do.
I hope y'all enjoyed that conversation with Dr. Amanda. And I certainly always am excited to sit with our guests, because they just always bring a new perspective for me and remind me of just how much intentionality, just how intentional we really have to be in creating space for us to really thrive and move toward higher versions of ourselves. So if you enjoyed that episode, I hope you will do two things. I hope you will share it with a friend, right? Share it with a friend, share it on your social media, share it in your community so that other people, other Black women can move out of survival mode as well. And make certain to subscribe and turn on your post notifications for Real Talk with Dr. LaWanda Hill. You don't want to miss any of the episodes that we have coming up as we center Black women, our stories, our narratives, our unique journeys to becoming a higher version of ourselves. I'll see y'all next time.